Helm's Deep on a coffee table. This entire siege, thousands of troops, towering walls, and all-out last stand. This should take up an entire room. I've shrunk it down to 10mm scale, and somehow it still feels massive. And let me tell you, getting it here nearly killed me. So buckle up and let's build the tiniest yet most epic Helm's Deep ever.
The iconic fortress of Rohan is something that every wargamer dreams of recreating. So I sent an Uruk-hai scout to steal Zorps. But it turns out that unless you own a warehouse, something like this is just not practical. I would need to do some more research. That's when I found one particular image that really captured my imagination in the old War of the Rings supplement for Lord of the Rings Warhammer. I always loved the idea of massed battles in Middle-earth, but the sheer cost of amassing two forces that size is frankly staggering.
Oh hell no!
So when John from JMax Armies of Middle-earth invited me to join him, the Wizard's Brush, Nat 1 and Timeless Tabletop Gaming on a 10mm diorama challenge, I thought,
okay, 10mm may well be the perfect solution for capturing the grand scale of Helm's Deep while keeping it playable, affordable, and easy to store.
In the War of the Ring book, the Relief of Helm's Deep scenario states that the board should be 6 by 4 feet. After working through some complex mathematical equations, basically dividing everything by 2.8, I worked out that by converting into 10mm scale, this board would drop to a size of 60 by 40 centimeters. And so I quickly cut MDF and polystyrene to size and glued them together. It's tiny compared to the stuff that I usually make, which is perfect really for a nice little coffee table board game. But before I start working on my layout, I need some bases. So I launched Adobe Illustrator and quickly designed some at the right size and laser cut them out of 1mm thin ply. I used them to roughly map out my layout using the War of the Rings book as a reference. But I found that the board is just too small, and so it was back to square one. This time I made the base for my board 90 by 60 centimeters. I'll have to save the smaller board for a future project.
If you have any ideas about what I should do with it, then let me know in the comments. But for now, let's get on with building Helm's Deep.
To cut the walls, I'll need to use my Proxxon hot wire cutter and my circular cutting jig. But the walls of the keep are not only circular, they are also slightly tapered. So I set the wire at an 85-degree angle, set the guide nail at 15.5 centimeters and got cutting. I needed to cut 3 stackable circles to form the keep walls, but each circle needed to be 1 centimeter smaller in diameter than the previous circle. Otherwise, the 85-degree tapered angle would not work. The inside of each circle was cut so that the top of the walls would have enough room to fit some defenders during gameplay. I kept the inside at 90 degrees, but I still needed to create the inner thoroughfare and inner keep. And so continued to move the guide nail of my circular cutting jig closer towards the hot wire, creating ever smaller circles. My crafting table was a mess, so a quick cleanup was in order before cutting the stack of circles in half. Unfortunately, I couldn't fit the entire stack through the cutter, so I left the base intact for now. This would be future Adam's problem, but right now I'm focused on gluing the pieces of wall together. Okay, well, having semicircles of foam is all well and good, but Helm's Deep has bits that stick out, like the gatehouse and this tower. And this is where the true nightmare that is radial geometry really became apparent. And it wasn't long for frustration to take hold.
I hit it right before.
In order to cut the blocks for the gatehouse, the back edge needed to have an 85-degree tapered concave curve of the right depth to sit flush against the walls of the keep. Just saying that combination of words hurts my brain. Initially, I thought it would be easy enough to use the offcuts from the circles, but then realised they wouldn't have the tapered outside edge I wanted. And the offcuts weren't all equal in depth. So in the end, I cut a wide strip of foam, used the circular cutting jig to get the curve I needed before measuring and cutting them to size with the correct angles. Cutting each block was like a leap of faith. This was definitely compounded by the fact that this was my last sheet of the old gold XPS from Bunnings. But despite many miscuts and curse words, I finally got into a rhythm and started to assemble the gatehouse. Using pins to hold each segment in place, I cut the hard edges to better suit the Helm's Deep aesthetic. Cutting out the flat edge between the gatehouse and towers was frankly terrifying and ultimately redundant, as I later ended up cutting the whole thing out anyway. I sculpted the small tower to the left of the gatehouse in much the same way, but I couldn't help but wonder how long it would take to texture all of this. My first attempt was to carefully measure and mark where each line of bricks would be. This was way too long. Instead, I used the circle offcuts, which were sliced into various thicknesses. I numbered them and used them to trace guidelines onto the walls. This turned out to be a really easy way to create the brick pattern on the curved walls. It didn't take too long to methodically cut into the foam, following the lines before accentuating each cut with a sharp pencil. I continued in this way, adding the brick pattern to the tower and gatehouse. To create the stone texture, I pressed a scrunched up ball of aluminium foil into the foam. This would be difficult to do in the hard to reach areas, so I decided to texture everything before gluing the gatehouse and towers in place. But cutting the sloping curved shape of the inner walkway would be the next challenge. Again, the circular offcuts proved invaluable for tracing guidelines. Using a sturdy and sharp blade is essential for making cuts like this, and even then it can catch on the foam, making small tears. But I was pleasantly surprised with how well this worked.
It's not too bad actually. The third thing is I'm going to do this all over again for the causeway, and that'll be bigger.
That would be a problem I would need to tackle later. I have a gate to build. Well, actually the surrounding masonry first. For this I used 2 thin sheets of XPS and cut the curved recess shapes using bases as guides. I glued them in place and carved the brick pattern off camera to create a sense of mystery, not because I forgot to hit record. But do you know who did hit record? Sir Peter Jackson, which is why we have these great reference shots of the inner keep detailing. So here we have some more geometric shapes. I know you're probably thinking, come on Adam, they're just triangles. Wrong! The back edge of them is curved, so they sit flush against the inner keep. The method is that of math, which I will not utter here. Suffice to say that after more brain confuddling frustration, I was very happy with the result. For the crenellations, I cut 8mm thin circles of foam, tapered the top edge with my knife, cut and foil ball textured them before gluing into place. Time for a break from stone textures. I don't know what the proper term for them is, so please let me know in the comments. For now, I'm just going to call them little wooden trapdoor defense thingies. The wood grain texture was created by carving shallow grooves into the foam with a sharp pencil. I really love the textural contrast created by this little detail. Okay, now it's finally time to tackle the causeway. I started with a large curved piece of foam, cut off a portion to double the height, and cut the needed slope. Adding the curved arch underneath was a challenge. I drew a guideline and used the hot wire cutter freehand. The 2 pieces were glued together carefully to ensure a seamless looking transition. This was by no means perfect, but created a good enough look. And then a whole lot of brick carving using the same methods as earlier completed the causeway. Helm's Deep would be intersected by the edge of the board, and so needed to be cut in half. This would result in the iconic Hornberg being left out of this build. Disappointing? Well, by this stage of the project, with all the geometric challenges I've faced, not even a little bit. I don't even feel guilty about cheating with the gate, which I ended up 3D printing. This did lead to the frankly terrifying act of cutting the gate recess. There would be no second chances with this, so a steady hand was absolutely critical. Thankfully all went well and the gate fit snugly into the recess. My male pattern baldness became even more pronounced after the stress of cutting the breach in the deeping wall. But again, thankfully this turned out just fine. I gave Helm's Deep a lick of paint all over using grey house paint before moving on to planning the landform. I wanted the look of a valley, but the slopes needed to be shallow enough for gameplay. After all, there's nothing worse than wobbly model syndrome. So I built up layers of 10mm polystyrene and shaved the edges down with my blade to create gentle slopes as well as the stream running from the deeping wall and underneath the causeway. In the film, the fortress appears to be carved from the living stone of the mountainside. I would therefore need to create some convincing looking rock faces. Carving natural looking rock formations into XPS foam can be a lot of fun creatively. I like to use a variety of knives to create different cuts, some straight and flat, some jagged and rough. Combining these with rock molds can be very effective. All the joints in the rocks were blended with sculptor mold. This was also used to smooth the layers of polystyrene, and once it was dry, the whole board was painted again with grey. Helm's Deep has a greenish grey colour palette in the films, so to match this I used my airbrush to apply patches of colour using stony beige, olive green and dark brown paints, followed by a dry brush of light grey, and the fortress really started coming to life. I used a standard brush to paint the gate and the little wooden trapdoor defence thingies. I wanted the wooden areas to contrast with the grey-greens of the stone, so I used brown as the base before adding a lighter tan colour for the wood grain. The metal detailing on the gate was painted a rusty looking orangey brown and then stippled with a lighter orange.
Well, I have to say I'm really happy with how this is looking so far. Now it's time to add the ground cover.
I spread PVA glue over the board before sprinkling a mix of soil and tile grout. I used a greater ratio of tile grout than I usually do in this mix so that it would suit the 10mm scale better. The excess was shaken off and ineffectually collected for reuse. At various points at the base of the rocks I scattered small chunks of slate followed by a sprinkle of coarse sand. This would emulate the natural look of erosion. For tonal variation, I sprinkled light patches of yellow fine flock over the grout cover. To set the aggregates securely in place, I worked in patches. First with a spray of isopropyl alcohol, which breaks the surface tension and allows the matte sealant to penetrate the layers of grit, grout and flock. I used my airbrush to apply some light patches of colour and added some green to the stream bed. I also added a light dry brush of grey. Rather than using resin on this board, I instead painted on some gloss Mod Podge to give the stream a subtle wet shiny effect. Okay, so that's the board done. Now I just need 1,000 tiny little minis. So right back when I first started planning this crazy idea, I scoured the internet for 10mm mini STLs. Sadly, I couldn't find any for Rohan, but I did find ROK Minis who sell physical copies. I lit the beacons and Rich, the owner, answered. He generously said he would post me a whole lot of his Horse Lords range. Shipping all the way from the UK to New Zealand, I could only hope they would arrive in time.
He has also very kindly set me up with an affiliate link, so if you fancy dipping your toes into the wonders of 10mm wargaming, then check it out in the description. Using that link and my code will get you a sweet discount and send a little bit of cash back my way.
I also found Wake's Emporium, whose creator kindly gave me 30% off for his Uruk-hai files. Varus Minis is another super generous creator who gave me some of his beautiful sculpts for potential future 10mm projects. I'll include links for all three in the description. I could get started printing all of the Isengard force right away and would just have to hope Rohan would arrive in time. I truly considered making 10,000 Uruks because, well, that'd just be so damn cool. But I calculated that would take 9 days of solid printing and 4 litres of resin. One day maybe, but for now I would have to settle for a miserly 800. I really do love the versatility that having a resin printer gives me, but I have to say it is not fun prepping, printing and cleaning out that many Uruk-hai. As time wore on and our collaboration deadline crawled ever closer, the true magnitude of what I was trying to do began to weigh heavily upon me. I had serious doubts about finishing in time.
That is a lot of Uruk-hai. It's like over 800. Plus there's the trolls and the ballistas. And I haven't even got the Rohan stuff in the mail yet. Which is probably a good thing because painting this lot is going to be an absolute marathon. I don't know how I'm going to be able to do it in time.
Despite the sinking feeling of an unachievable deadline, I have to admit these tiny Rohan dudes are seriously good looking. ROK Minis sent me Gandalf, Theoden and Éomer, along with a whole lot of riders and royal guard. But now I really need to get a hustle on with this painting. Using an MDF offcut with double-sided tape for adhesion, I attached units in batches for priming. I started with the Uruks as I figured despite there being so many of them, they would be a lot simpler to paint. Of course the weather decided to pack in at that point. Ah well, it'll probably settle down soon. After the black prime, I gave them all a Zenithal spray of Rust-Oleum aluminium. They looked absolutely ridiculous, but I have a solution for these fighting Uruk-hai. Absolutely drenching them in washes and inks with my airbrush. This worked a treat, and felt like a cheat code for speeding up my process. I couldn't leave them like that though, they of course all needed to be touched up. I painted all the pike shafts and banners with black contrast paint, every single face with Bugman's glow, and a whole lot of tiny white handprints. I have been described as somewhat obsessional, a rather unfair observation. The tiny Rohan minis were a far greater challenge. I used contrast paints over a white prime for these guys, which sped things up a little. However, the sheer number of them and the range of colours made for painstakingly slow progress.
This must be like the 4th night in a row that I've been painting past midnight. This project's going to be the death of me. It's time to ask for some help.
So I called up my speed painting buddy Nathan, and he turned my rather meagre collection into a force to be reckoned with. Of course, I still needed to base them all into units. As with everything in this project, the sheer number of minis made this a very long process. But that's not all, they also needed to be flocked. So once again, it was time for some help. This time from my daughter, who, being the absolute mercenary that she is, required payment in the form of some online shopping using my credit card. After what has felt like an absolutely crushing few days, my troops could finally march to war. This is where 10mm scale really comes into its own. It just looks so freaking epic having massed ranks of troops in formation like this. And now that I've set them all up, I can't help but feel that there needs to be even more Uruks. Like maybe another 9,000? Be sure to check out the other lads' crazy builds, which are linked in the description.
Thanks so much for making it this far, and let me know if you'd like to see more builds at this scale. Please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Until then, good hobbying everyone.